If there's a wave of trans women who dominate the sport against other women, all those sports will become less interesting based on how we all watch sports. Even the Super Bowl here in the United States, if it's a blowout by halftime, nobody watches the second half.
Right.
We watch it for the equality of the contest. Okay, so
sounds like you agree
all
with
I'm
me
saying
then.
is, like you said, wait, I'm almost done. So what I see is sports is on the frontier of how to handle this.
Today's video, we're diving into the latest heated debate as Neil deGrasse Tyson steps onto Piers Morgan's show. The famed astrophysicist, known for mixing science with social commentary, has stirred controversy again, this time by suggesting we redefine sports categories based on hormone levels rather than biological sex. His bold idea has sparked a firestorm online, with critics calling it overcomplicated and ignoring hard biology. So, is Tyson giving us a glimpse of the future of fair play? Or is this a cosmic miscalculation? Let's break it all down and see what's really going on.
I absolutely want all trans people to have utter equality and fairness in the way that I do and you do. Absolutely. I've never said anything different. However, not to the point where it erodes women's rights to fairness and equality. And there is clearly a growing unfairness and inequality from the issue of people who are born biologically male, identifying as women, and being allowed to compete against biological females, and then beginning increasingly to be quite dominant, to the extent where we saw people winning in the boxing in the Paris Olympics. We've just seen the Footballer of the Year, Women's Footballer of the Year in the UK, voted by the BBC, Barbara Banda from Zambia, also has been banned for sex-related issues in terms of not being allowed to compete in previous tournaments. And so on and so on. The UN just had a big report which said that 900 medals around the world in competitive sport have been deprived from female athletes because trans athletes had won. So I put it to you that you're a scientist. It is clearly an indisputable scientific fact that biological males have a superior power and stamina and lung power and all these other things to biological females, because if they didn't, we would never separate the sexes in sport. The Olympics would be gender neutral, and they're not for a reason. Women wouldn't win anything. So when I hear you try and justify it or say that there's a scientific, and maybe there's not, maybe I'm misquoting you here, but there's some kind of scientific reason why it's fine, I'm like, hang on, Neil, you're Mr. Reality Check. You're Mr. Cold Hard Fact. Surely you can see that this is wrong without it actually having to be transphobic to say that.
Well, so you have me here live on your show. We don't have to comment on other shows. So let's just have this conversation.
Yeah.
So I did my own study of the relative speed of men relative to women in Olympic sports, the world records, from the 100 meters to the 200 meters, the 400, right on up to the marathon. And what I noticed is in every event, on average, men were 10% faster than women. 10% faster. And in events that require strength, that percent was even higher. I forgot what my exact number, it might have been 50% stronger, okay? So across the board, that is the case. So that's not, there's no dispute there. That's
right.
Just objective truth. So now we have to ask, why do we watch sports at all?
Tyson's latest foray into the intersection of science and social policy revolves around a provocative idea: redefining sports categories not by traditional gender, but by hormone levels, drawing a parallel to wrestling's weight classes. Tyson suggests that restructuring competitions this way could preserve fairness while keeping the excitement and unpredictability that audiences love. He acknowledges the well-documented physical advantages of biological males, citing Olympic data showing men outperforming women by roughly 10% in speed and 50% in strength across various events. Yet, Tyson frames this as a frontier challenge, one without a universally accepted solution. By proposing hormone-based classifications, he aims to ignite a broader conversation on how to balance inclusion with fairness in competitive sports.
Okay, and at Friday Night Lights, that's in the United States, that's high school football. Saturday, it's college football. Sunday, it's the NFL. Do you realize, of course, that the worst team ever in the NFL could wipe its ass with the best team ever in college? Why? Because every single player in the NFL was the best person in their college. And so there's no contest between these zones of athletic engagement. But we still like watching college. We don't watch college and say, you know, the Philadelphia Eagles could whip their ass, so let's not watch it. No, we like the equality of the contest and not knowing who would win. That's what makes sports fun. Okay, so if there's a wave of trans women who dominate the sport against other women, all those sports will become less interesting based on how we all watch sports. Even the Super Bowl here in the United States, if it's a blowout by halftime, nobody watches the second half.
Right.
We watch it for the equality of the contest. Okay, so
sounds like you agree
all
with
I'm
me
saying is, like you said, wait, I'm almost done. So what I see is sports is on the frontier of how to handle this frontier of people who are trans. It's on the frontier of how to resolve that. And I'm making this up now. Imagine the future of sports does not distinguish sex. It distinguishes and sorts people by hormone ratios. I'm making this up, but imagine that if that were the case. That would be interesting. You get a hormone test, you're in this range, and then you compete against other people.
Here's Piers Morgan firing back at Neil deGrasse Tyson's proposal with sharp criticism, calling it an idealistic idea that collapses under the weight of reality. Tyson acknowledges the well-known biological advantages men hold in sports. But Morgan zeroes in on the contradictions in his argument. While hormone-based classifications might sound progressive, Morgan argues they overlook critical physiological differences: lung capacity, endurance, and muscle mass that give biological males a measurable edge. To him, Tyson's idea is more theoretical than practical, ignoring why sex-based divisions exist in the first place and the broader implications of biology in competition. Morgan concludes that Tyson's vision, though well-intentioned, lacks the grounding needed to tackle the real complexities of fairness in athletics, a notion Morgan finds, frankly, ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
That's
Neil, that is ridiculous.
No, it's not. I'll tell you why it's
You're
not ridiculous.
You're going to give every single
I used to
person in
wrestle.
sport a hormone test.
Hold on. I used to wrestle. And wrestling, there are people who weigh, sorry, am I using pounds here, 125 pounds, right on up to 240 pounds. They don't wrestle each other. The entire sport separates people so that the contest is interesting.
Yeah.
And so the people of the same weight wrestle each other, and that is the contest.
But if Floyd Mayweather...
I don't know if that's how it will land.
Hang on, Neil. If Floyd Mayweather fought a woman boxer, a female woman boxer, who was the same weight division, he would annihilate her. That's why we don't let it happen. And in fact, in the Paris Olympics, the winner of one of the women's boxing competitions, one of the
Piers,
females
that's
who
not what I was
took her
talking
on.
about.
But my point is that I just think that, if you don't mind me saying, I say this respectfully because I love you, but it just seems to me like you've dug yourself into a slight hole on this issue, and you're trying to get out of it. And now you're suggesting slightly mad theories, whereas the science to me is obvious. You've already given the best argument I've heard for why we separate the sexes.
Hold on. You misquoted me in this very interview. What I said was the idea of creating categories within a sport, splitting them in the example I gave, which I just made it up, like hormone ratios, is not fundamentally weird compared to dividing wrestlers by weight.
No,
because
it is.
The only reason why you do this is to make an interesting contest.
No, Neil, you're wrong.
And so you said Floyd Mayweather fight. Hold on, hold on.
You're
you
wrong.
said Floyd Mayweather.
You're not
fighting
allowing for the superior male biology when it comes to lung capacity, stamina, to body mass, to muscle mass, all those things. If you just take one criteria of hormones, you're not allowing all that. I'll give an example. Caitlyn Jenner, who obviously hang on. I'm going to finish my point. Let me finish my point. Caitlyn Jenner was a Olympic male decathlon gold medal winner. Caitlyn is a big golf fan, and when she started playing golf after she transitioned, she was allowed to play off the women's tees, which are 50 yards further than the men's tees. And she quickly realized that she was still smashing it 300 yards down, and obviously was then beating all the women that she played. So she now plays back off the male tees because her...
Morgan, not holding back, using biting sarcasm to paint Neil deGrasse Tyson as either a cosmic justice warrior or an awakened prophet delivering solutions so lofty they seem untethered from reality. Tyson's proposal to categorize athletes by hormone levels is framed as a whimsical fantasy, something Morgan mockingly suggests was conjured on the spot, a product of what he calls Tyson's goat-oriented tendons. But Morgan's critique goes beyond the absurdity of the idea. He argues that, while Tyson's approach is steeped in progressive ideals, it lacks the practicality to address real-world challenges. To Morgan, it's less about finding a workable solution and more about Tyson casting himself as a oracle championing ideas that sound rational in theory but falter when applied.
I don't have a solution. What I started this section of the conversation by saying that how you handle trans athletes is a frontier in sports that does not yet have a full solution. And I made up an example, like maybe you could divide people by hormones. I don't know if that would work physiologically, but at the end of the day, we watch sporting events because they are competitively interesting. And so something's going to have to get resolved there, and I don't have that solution.
I do.
I just tossed up hormones.
You have a trans category, or you have the trans women compete against biological men, which is what they are. And I completely respect trans rights.
That may be.
Yeah. Look, the truth is, if you had a gender-neutral Olympics, how many women, biological female women, would win gold medals if it was open to men and women? The answer is literally like they might win one or two.
I'm trying to stay above. You're creating this world that makes great clickbait.
No, I'm not. Honestly, I'm not. I'm throwing back at you the thing you throw back at other people, which is science. I'm telling you that it's the scientific reality. Unless you say otherwise, and I don't think you do, because you've already explained that men have a superior speed of power. I'm not saying otherwise. I started this. The science is clear. I
started this by saying it.
But the science is clear, isn't it?
And I'm saying the solution isn't clear, even if the science is. And so that's all. We can debate what could work. I think the world has to figure it out, and maybe they'll figure it out one day. And maybe it is hormone ratios. I don't know. But if it is hormone ratios and we don't compete sexes, we compete by hormones, that's a whole other interesting future of athletics. By the way, every Olympics, I pause and think to myself, which of these events can and should not be separated by sex? There are some already that are the case. And the equestrian. The equestrian does not separate men from women. Equestrian
and shooting, I think, also is another one where if they're sitting and shooting, there's no reason.
I didn't know. Yeah. So I just figured there's some that would be the case. We can start there and just work our way up. So yeah, it's a frontier. People are thinking about it.
The heated exchange between Neil deGrasse Tyson and Piers Morgan takes place against the backdrop of a larger cultural debate over transgender rights, fairness in competition, and the role of science in shaping policy. Tyson, always an advocate for scientific rigor, insists that nature is the ultimate arbiter of truth, but paradoxically steps into speculative territory with his proposal to classify athletes by hormone levels. Morgan seizes on this tension, repeatedly highlighting the disconnect between Tyson's intellectual abstractions and their real-world implications. The debate captures the growing friction between progressive ideals and the practical realities they aim to address. Positioning Tyson's arguments as emblematic of a cultural moment where theoretical solutions often stumble when applied to